Well, hello everybody, Chris Sandel here, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm really excited to have you on the call, and thanks so much for showing up live. We're going to cover lots of useful tips and information. So I suggest having a pen and paper handy so you can make notes. We're going to start in a sec, but firstly, I just want to make sure you don't have any distractions. I really want you to get the most out of today's workshop. So although I know it's sometimes hard to do, can you sort of shut off your phone or at least put it on just silent, shut down emails, come out of Facebook and Twitter and whatever other pages you have open, just so you can be sort of 100% focused on the webinar. I really promise to make it worth your while, and you'll just get so much more out of it if it's distraction-free. So as a way of an introduction, let me just set the scene. So today's webinar is called How to Maintain a Healthy Weight Without Restriction, Deprivation, or Constant Exercise. And I know for some people this may sound like a strange title, and they may be thinking, I don't want to be maintaining my weight, I want to be losing it. With everything I do with clients, my number one goal is health. And while in most people's mind they equate losing weight to better health, this isn't always the case. And this is especially true for a lot of the people I typically see. And while the media is always talking about the obesity epidemic and that everyone's eating junk food and never exercising, these just aren't the kinds of people who are ending up in my practice. I'm seeing clients, and mostly women, who are already trying to be healthy. They're doing the things that they've been told, but it's just not working for them. So they're going to the gym regularly. This could be sort of once or twice a week. For other clients, it's 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. They're often pretty tired, and they kind of love to ditch the exercise, or at least ditch doing it as much as they are. But they just want to keep it up so they can lose weight. They're often restricting or undereating, and this can be sort of a conscious decision with them following a specific diet where they're cutting carbs or they're going low fat. They are often already or also keeping their calories low. So whether that's 1,200 calories or 1,600 calories, it's normally some figure that they've read in some health or fitness article or read in some book. But the undereating can also be unconscious. They aren't actively trying to keep their calories low, but their diet revolves around a lot of, say, raw food or lightly steamed vegetables or lots of juicing or steamed fish or vegetarian protein. And they're eating sort of quote unquote healthy, but the very nature of a lot of these foods mean they're low in calories. And the point of their sort of exercise and eating routine is to lose weight. But unfortunately, it's not really going anywhere. Or in some cases, it's worse and it's actually increasing. And often they don't want to lose a huge amount. It's like 2 kilos or 5 kilos or sort of 5 or 10 pounds. They might want to come down a dress size or 2, but really no matter what they try, it just isn't happening. And honestly, people who I'm typically seeing, the weight that they want to lose is purely for vanity. And while they may tell themselves that their goals are about health, it's really about aesthetics. I mean, most of the people I'm seeing are having their weight in no way impact on their health. They're a size 12 and they want to be a size 10, or they're a size 10 and they want to be a size 6. And look, not all of them are this skinny, but I honestly cannot remember the last time I had a client where their weight was actually causing problems. And the sad thing is, despite all the work that these people are putting in, they aren't really satisfied. They don't feel good enough. They don't love their body. Women who are really kind of stunning by our standards of beauty within our society, who should feel like incredibly lucky, are feeling miserable. And so many people are able to maintain their weight, but only if they're sort of restricting and running themselves into the ground through exercise. Sort of being able to maintain your weight while only eating 1,600 calories isn't really something to be celebrated. It's just really setting your body up for failure. And this is something I'm going to explain as we go through this webinar. Because personally, I want people to be eating 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 calories even a day and still having steady weight. And what that final number ends up being will differ from person to person. But the goal is to be giving the body absolutely everything it needs while still maintaining a steady weight. And why is this important? The reason this is important is at its most basic level, food is energy. It allows the body to do the almost infinite number of tasks it has to do every single day. And the more you're able to do it and give it, the more it's able to do these tasks. And if you're able to give your body large amounts of food and it's able to maintain a healthy weight, then this is a real fair indication that the body's working well. And in my mind, this should be the ultimate goal. So hopefully that gives a bit of an introduction and sets the scene and wasn't kind of too long-winded. So let's look at then what we're going to be covering exactly today. So first off, I'm going to walk you through how you can roughly work out what you need to be consuming on a daily basis. And look, this is not an exact science, but what I'm going to show you is how you can work out the best estimate. Next, we're going to look at what happens when someone doesn't hit these targets. I'm going to be looking at it mostly from the perspective of when someone's not taking in enough, as this is typically what I'm seeing in practice. And so I'm going to explain the theory of what happens behind this. And next, what we'll do is we're going to look at some studies to support this in real life. So rather than just sort of speculation and anecdotes, I'll be able to back it up with real life experiments. Then we're going to have a look at the weight set point theory. And what someone weighs isn't just a function of how much food they eat or how much exercise you do. And the weight set point theory helps to explain this, and I'm going to go through it. Next, we're going to have a look at some client examples, and I'm going to walk you through 2 clients that I worked with to show the improvements that they made. And more importantly, this will help to demonstrate the mental and emotional side to weight gain and to weight loss, because people's beliefs can have a really big impact on the choices that they make and their happiness. And I'm going to go through this with you. And then we're going to look at sort of how to maintain a healthy weight. And we're going to be covering this the whole way through the webinar, but this is where we're going to kind of pull it all together. And I'll be giving you sort of tips and suggestions as we go through, but we're going to kind of cover it all in one place at this point. And these are things that you can then be doing to sort of achieve the goal of maintaining a healthy weight without restriction and deprivation and constant exercise. So before I go any further, I just want to give you a bit of background on myself. My name is Chris Sandel. I'm a nutritionist. I run the company 7 Health. I'm originally from Sydney, but have been living in the UK for the last 11 years. And most of that time was in London, but I now live out in Kent and moved here nearly 2 years ago. Kent is known as the Garden of England, and where I live is just surrounded by fields and forest and lots of greenery. It's a very beautiful and picturesque place to live. As a nutritionist, I work with clients on a one-to-one basis. I work with them for a period of 5 months, and we look at sort of all angles of health, all angles of their life to improve their health. And diet is a big part of this, but as you'll see as we go through this webinar, diet is only sort of one part of the puzzle. Lifestyle factors like work and exercise and people's relationship with food and their relationship with their body and body image, and all of these things can have a huge impact on someone's health. And these are all things that we sort of work on. I also give lots of talks. This can be to businesses who are wanting to improve the health of their employees. It can be for gyms who want to offer the same kind of services for their clients. And I also lecture for the School of Natural Therapies in London. And as you'll see as we go through this webinar, a lot of my suggestions and opinions go against the grain a little and may seem a little controversial. I mean, personally, I think what I suggest is pretty straightforward and pretty rational. But I think given the world that we live in and the extreme nature of sort of many of the everyday health suggestions, I think my common sense sort of ideas can often come across as radical. And I think that's just the world. Excuse me, I'll just have a drink of water. I think that's just more the world we live in. I'm hugely passionate about the topic of health, and I want people to live in sort of happier and healthier lives. And I want them to do this in the sort of easiest and most stress-free way. And so many people are trying to be healthy and have this kind of long list of must-dos and must-avoids, and their pursuit of health just really overtakes their life. And a lot of the time, it doesn't actually improve their health. And I want people to be healthy using sort of readily available and everyday foods instead of sort of supposed superfoods and magic cures from the Amazon or the Incas, or having to do all of your shopping at the sort of health food store. So I think that you can be very healthy using everyday foods and living a very normal life. And I really want to be able to show that to you. So I want to just tell you what I mean by a healthy weight. And a healthy weight is a weight that is not impacting on your health or on the function of your body. Sure, you might still have some symptoms, but these symptoms aren't being driven by the weight. It's because of other processes going on within the body. I think too often when people think of the idea of a healthy weight, it's one where they have visible abs or are a size 6 or have the body of sort of a photoshopped movie star on the front of a magazine. And none of these things necessarily constitute a healthy weight. And often they can really indicate the opposite. And so I really want you to keep this in mind as we go through this webinar, because I think it's really important. I'm going to show you why. So I want to show you why this is important, why it's important to be taking in enough food to sort of meet the demands of your everyday life. And I'm going to show you what happens when you're not doing this and what happens in both the short term and in the long term. And to make this point, I want to show you an online calculator. You can see a picture here of it, but I'm going to go online in a second. And I'm going to use as a tool to just kind of roughly show you what you should be consuming. And this is kind of just the theory of it. And what I'm going to then show you is what consistently happens, or what happens when someone consistently goes on a diet or undereats. So let's just come into here. So this is the online calculator. There's lots of different ones that you can use, but this is the one that I use with clients. Don't worry about trying to write down the web address. I'll send everyone who's on this webinar an email with it. If I knew how to add it to the kind of chat box thingy with the webinar, I'd do it, but I'm worried I'm going to blow the whole thing up, and so I'll just do it later. So you will get an email with this address here. So what I've done is kind of cook say, this is one I prepared earlier. I put in some basic information. So in the example we're looking at a female, and you can change the gender here. I've put in that they're 31 years old, that they are 60 kilograms, and that their height is 162 centimeters. I'm originally from Australia, as I said, so I typically think in the metric system. If you are from the US or you don't think in that way, that works out at 133 pounds and 5'3". And so below here, you'll see that there's another set of dials. And all of these dials include sort of activities that can take place during the day. And in this example, I'm going to be picking someone who's having no exercise take place on this day. And I'm going to show you what happens when they start to include exercise, but for now, we're just going to start on a non-exercise day. And what I would say, or I should have said, is with the figures that I'm using here, they're irrelevant in a lots of senses. Like whatever your height or weight, the same principles that I'm going to go through now still apply. So in here, we've got a figure for standing and walking. And I've put this as 2.5 hours. And I don't know how well you can see it at your end, but it says standing, walking, cooking, easy walking, shopping. And so when people kind of include sort of possibly sort of walking to the station to catch public transport, standing on a bus or a train, walking around the office or their house, having a shower, doing some washing, hanging out clothes, all of those activities, those often mundane activities, I think 2.5 hours is probably a fair estimate. But it's just, I had to pick a number, so that's why I've gone with that figure. And then the same with down here for sleeping. I've picked 8 hours. And again, this is going to vary from person to person. So if you see up here, we've got two numbers. So the first one is 1,353, and this is calorie intake. And below here, again, I can't see how much you can read, or don't know how much you can read, but it says basal metabolic rate. The second figure is 1,917, and this is for total energy expenditure. So basal metabolic rate is the bare bones minimum that you need to keep your different sort of systems and organs ticking over. So what you need for your nervous system to work, to produce hormones, so you can build new bones. And in a sense, it's what you need if you're in a coma. It's kind of like the bare bones just to cover the basics. The next figure, the total energy expenditure, is what this calculator believes you need once you include all the other activities in your life. So this is the conversations you have to be able to think and to be able to work, and then to be able to do all the extra activities that you've included down in this section here. And so according to this calculator, it thinks that the maximum that this person would use in a day would be 1,917 calories. So let's see what happens if we then include some exercise. So in this example, say this person went and did a fairly intense session at the gym, and they did it for an hour. So let's put in that they did sort of 10 minutes where there was intense exercise. So that's kind of maximum effort, fast running, fast rowing. So in a session, they might do 10 minutes of that. We're then going to put in 40 minutes of moderate exercise. So this would be strength training, wood chopping, most sports, bicycling, and there's probably then another 10 minutes, but let's just say that for that time, they're sort of catching their breath, they're walking around. We just don't really need to add it in. So let's have a look at what's happened to the figures at the top. The basal metabolic rate stayed exactly the same, and that should happen because it's only meant to cover the very basics. But you can see that the total energy expenditure has gone up. So it's now showing as 2,309. And previously it was showing as 1,917. So it's increased by 392 calories, so just shy of 400 calories for that gym session. One thing I should also mention is that this calculator doesn't include anything based on the intensity of someone's job or their day-to-day life. And this is important because while people think that you only burn calories if you're kind of going for a run or doing exercise, it's really not the case. In Robert Sapolsky's excellent book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, he references a study of chess grandmasters. And the study found that chess grandmasters in the middle of a tournament are going through anywhere between 6,000 and 7,000 calories a day just thinking and strategizing. Now, your job is probably not going to be as intense as that, or at least not all the time. But for a lot of the people that I work with, their work life is something that's really quite intense and should possibly be added into this equation. And look, I know personally on the days where I have 5 or 6 or 7 hours of client, it's a much bigger ask on me and I need much more food. And if you're someone who's consistently working sort of 10 or 12-hour days, this is going to be using up much more energy than someone who's working a 7-hour day and then taking it easy for the rest of the time. So this could be something that should be then included into that total energy expenditure figure and could push those numbers up slightly. So if this was someone who I was working with, my general advice would be for them to be eating somewhere around about that total energy expenditure figure. So somewhere around about 2,200, 2,300, maybe 2,400, depending on the demands of their life. I would add that when someone's healing, their body needs more. And this is because you don't just need energy for now, you need it for all the kind of previous indiscretions. I'd also say their ability to sort of digest and assimilate food is also going to be diminished. So they'll be getting a lot less out of the food. And so this could be the reason that they need a bit more. And this is just general statements, and there's lots of factors that would be taken into consideration. But I would suggest that this is kind of the ballpark that they should be having, instead of moving up and down to see what works. And this is something that would be worked up to. If someone's been living off, say, 1,500 calories, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to add just an extra 500 or 800 calories in a day. So it would be built up over time. And I'd also say what I'm showing you here is definitely not where I start with people. There are lots of things that we can be doing before we need to start looking at specific calorie amounts. We really only get to this point once I know that people are doing sort of foundational stuff right. And the reason I'm showing you this today is because I want to explain what happens when people don't get this right and how this can affect their health and their weight. So as I said earlier, I know the common reports are that we see in the news is that sort of everyone is overweight and people are living off junk food and they aren't exercising and they're over consuming calories. And while I agree that this is probably true for large segments of the population, it's definitely not what I'm seeing in practice. The people that I'm commonly sort of dealing with are people who are already trying to be healthy, who are conscious to eat healthy food or what they consider to be healthy food. And most of the time they're already exercising or exercising quite a lot. So what I'm seeing is people who are not overeating, but people who are undereating. Or if not undereating all the time, they're at least eating in a sort of boom and bust fashion, going from diet to diet with sort of periods of sort of blowouts and then periods of real restriction. So let's focus on the calculator again. And let's just say that according to this day of exercise, this person should be eating around about that 2,200, 2,300 mark. First off, for most people, this sounds like just a huge amount of calories. My clients are nearly always women, and the thought of like 2,300 calories seems like an obscene amount. And I should add that the weight that I've picked in this example is sort of 10 kilos or 20 pounds less than the UK average for women. And the reason I picked these numbers is it's actually a closer resemblance to a lot of the people I see in practice. But if we bump this up to that 70 kilo mark, the figure for total energy expenditure on this day jumps up to 2,555. So an even scarier figure for a lot of women. So let's just bring that back down. So let's see what happens when someone undereats. So say this person, their friend had told them that they should do a 1,200 calorie a day diet, that they had done it last summer and it had just been amazing for them. They'd lost loads of weight and they think it's such a great idea. So this person decides to follow their advice. At 1,200 calories a day, this person isn't even covering their sort of basal metabolic rate. They're not even recovering the sort of bare bones minimum of what they need to keep the body ticking over. And if someone does this for like one day, it's not really a big issue. The body can deal with sort of ups and downs and it'll make up for it over the next week. And it's pretty resilient. Pretty resilient. It becomes a problem when this becomes permanent. Your body just doesn't then have enough coming in for what it needs to do. And so it has two options. It can cut spending or it can start borrowing, and it does both of these. So it cuts spending by decreasing the energy that it gives to various organs and systems. So digestion is decreased, immune functions decreased, reproduction's decreased, memory, concentration, energy, all of these things are affected. So while the basal metabolic rate should be 1,353, the body just pulls it down. And so maybe it only allocates, say, 900 calories to those functions. And to do that, it has to turn things off or turn things down. And it can also borrow, and it does this by breaking down fat to be used as energy. It would be great if this was the only thing that was touched, or great at least in most people's minds, but it really isn't just fat that's broken down. It breaks down muscle and lean tissue. It breaks down organs. It demineralizes bone and breaks them down, because all of this stuff can be turned into much needed energy, and your body really prioritizes short-term survival over long-term health. So in the beginning, a 1,200 calorie a day diet will lead to some pretty severe or pretty high weight loss. But as time goes on, it really starts to slow down. The body adjusts to running on less and just becomes much more efficient. So people get to the stage where it feels like they're running on 1,200 calories a day, but their weight is stable. Or worse yet, it feels like it's climbing. And so how can this be? Well, often when people say they're on a 1,200 calorie a day diet, they're not actually doing it every day. So maybe there's one day a week where they have a heavy boozy night and they end up eating sort of pizza on the way home before going to bed. Or they're at a friend's birthday party and they plan to just have a starter, but before they know it, they've ordered a starter and a main, and when everyone else orders a dessert too, they do as well. And so they're eating low calorie most of the time, but there's blip days and there's days where they eat more. And so the problem here is that they've really primed their body to be thrifty and to run on rations. This is what the body gets most of the time, so this is what it expects. And when you then have a day where you eat 2,000 calories, what happens with that extra amount? Well, look, some of it is used for energy, but a large proportion of it is stored for a rainy day. You've turned your body into a sort of super conservative accountant, and when new money comes in, it doesn't want to spend it because it doesn't know when it's going to happen again, and it wants to really be cautious. So you really box yourself into a corner. You kind of pull down all the functions in the body and make it sort of much harder for it to maintain the weight. And it feels like sort of any slip up and suddenly you're going to be putting on weight and you just don't understand why. But worse still is it's really impacting on your health. There's just not enough energy coming in to give your body what it needs to do all the functions, and it's for very little gain. So that's the theory with how this stuff works. And it's the situation that I think a lot of people find themselves in. So look, now we've looked at the theory, let me walk you through some studies to show how it happens in practice. So the Minnesota starvation experiment was conducted between 1944 and 1945. It was the time where the Second World War, it had created a lot of conditions where there could be a situation where sort of millions in Europe and in Asia could face real severe famine. And through the experiment, what they hoped to learn was about how the body reacts in starvation, and also to help create a solution for sort of the possibly impending food shortage. So 36 men were used as part of the study, but only the results of 32 of them were used. The subjects were all white males ranging from 22 years of age to 33 years of age. The final 36 were picked from an original group of 400, with the candidates chosen due to their sort of mental and physical health and a real commitment to the study. So these were really strong, healthy men who were conscientious objectors who didn't want to fight in the war, but were really happy to help out their country by participating in the study. So the study started with 12 weeks of a control period where the men ate approximately 3,200 calories a day. And this was to get them to their ideal weight, and really it was to just create a calorie balance. So this was roughly what these guys were eating on an everyday, their normal everyday life. So it was then followed by 24 weeks, which was the starvation part of the experiment. And the men had their calorie intake cut to 1,560. So basically cut in half. And during this period, the men lost approximately 25% of their weight, which worked out at an average of 16.5 kilos or 37 pounds. But what's more important is they also experienced common symptoms during this time. And so let's have a look at some of those symptoms. So they had a reduced basal metabolic rate, and this really plummeted and fell by as much as 50%. They had a decreased pulse, dropping to sort of 30 or 40 beats per minute at rest. They had increased sensitivity to cold. All the men were wearing heavier clothes, more layers. They wanted hot and sort of boiling, sort of hot baths, sorry, and sort of boiling hot food and boiling hot drinks. They had freezing cold hands, freezing cold feet, and sort of just cold skin in general. And tea and coffee intake increased greatly, and the satisfaction that the guys got from these drinks also markedly increased. And they had to put a limit on it. When the guys started hitting 15 cups a day, they decided to set a limit of 9 cups as the maximum. There was a real increase in irritability. There was a real decrease in sexual desire, and with very less frequent erections for the guys. There was lower amount of red blood cells, and these are the ones that carry oxygen around the body. And so the guys developed an anemia of sorts. Certain white blood cells were also decreased by over 30%. And white blood cells are your immune system. Hair grew more slowly and fell out prematurely. Nails slowed and also stopped growing. The men, unsurprisingly, felt very little like exercise, and they actually spent most of their time sort of lying in the sun and trying to keep warm. They developed strong cravings for salt and for water. They prematurely aged in terms of appearance, but also in terms of function. Low blood pressure and regular dizziness on standing and vertigo. Some even experienced momentary blackouts. There was frequent urination, both during day and night. Constipation. So the men went into the study where they were all going once a day, and fairly shortly afterwards, they were going once or twice a week. Food obsession. It became really the principal topic of conversations and their thoughts. The guys would be reading books about it. So cookbooks, menus, information on food production became sort of intensely interesting to people who'd never sort of previously shown any interest in sort of diet or agriculture. And some of the participants even said that once the experiment was over, they were going to become cooks and they were going to open restaurants. Cuts and bruises were really slow to heal. They were getting muscle cramps, and muscle pain was very common. Their skin became sort of rough and thin. There was a loss of ambition, difficulty concentrating, and increased depression, and they spent more and more of their time alone. So I want to share with you a sort of a really great quote from one of the participants that really sort of sums up everything. It said, "I'm cold, I'm weak, and now I have edema," which is water retention. Social graces, interests, spontaneous activity, and responsibility take second place to concerns of food. I don't like to sit near guests, for then it's necessary to entertain and talk with them. I'm one of about 3 or 4 people who still goes out with girls. I fell in love with a girl during the control period, but I see her only occasionally now. It's almost too much trouble to see her, even if she visits me in the lab. It requires effort to hold her hand. Entertainment must be tame. If we see a show, the most interesting part of it is contained in the scenes where people are eating. I couldn't laugh at the funniest picture in the world, and love scenes are completely dull. And what's interesting as I look at this list of symptoms is it basically covers nearly everything that people come and see me for. So constipation, problems with their cycle, always cold, irritability, moodiness, frequent urination, muscle pain, water retention. And look, I'm not saying that undereating is sort of the only cause of all this, but it's a large component of it. So following the 24-week starvation period, there was a period of restricted rehabilitation, and this lasted for 12 weeks, and the men were split into different groups and given varied diets to sort of analyze the benefits of different proteins and different supplement regimes. And this was really to help them understand what were the best rations to feed the world if there were sort of mass food shortages. And then the final period, there was 8 weeks of unrestricted rehabilitation where the men could eat whatever caloric intake they wanted and whatever food content they wanted. And during the first week of unrestricted rehabilitation, the individual intakes of food varied from 4,400 up to 10,000 calories a day. And some of the men commented that they were still hungry at the end of very large meals, even if they were unable to ingest any more food. And during the unrestricted rehabilitation, the men rapidly put on both weight and body fat. But they also saw health improvements, with some of them happening almost instantaneously. So, in a 3-day period, one subject gained 6 pounds and had his resting pulse increase from 36 to 60. Another had their BMR nearly double in a 3-day period. And after 12 weeks of eating as much as they wanted, body fat had matched pre-experiment levels, despite the fact that these guys were weighing less than when they started. By 8 months, their lean body mass was restored to pre-experiment levels, but their abdominal fat was 40% higher than when they started. But it was at this point that the fat levels began to drop despite eating to satiety. And by 46 weeks of unrestricted eating, weight and fat percentage had basically returned to pre-experiment levels. So by using hunger cues and eating what they needed, the body returned to that natural healthy place that it started. So this graph sort of, it shows what happened. So you can see body weight is the one with the black dots through it, and it dropped during the starvation part of the experiment, and then increased during the unrestricted eating, and then naturally came back to the same baseline level where it started. And you can then see the same thing happen with the body fat, which is the one with the white dots, but this is happening with a much more significant up and down. So the body fat really dropped down during the but then during the overfeeding came up much higher than it had previously been. But once again, it basically returned back to the same starting level. So this is just such a fascinating experiment. I mean, it's one that they could never do today for ethical reasons, but it's really hugely enlightening. And while the health side of things I think is really important, let's just forget about that for now and just focus on the weight for a moment. Because when someone restricts their calories, whether through conscious dieting or just eating healthy, sort of quote unquote healthy, and sort of not realizing their calories are low, they are in a sense doing exactly what this experiment shows. And when this low calorie intake ceases, what happens? Well, weight goes on with a disproportionate amount of it being sort of fat rather than lean muscle. And when this happens, what's most people's knee-jerk reaction? It's to start restricting again and to try and lose the weight. So they lose some weight, they stop dieting, and then fat is added again. And this is really the vicious cycle that lots of people find themselves in, and they really feel trapped because of it. And one of the biggest lessons from this experiment is what happens when the body is given what it needs to heal. At first, more weight is stored as fat, but with time, things start to change. The body, in a sense, it realizes that it just doesn't need to store as much for a rainy day, that there was decent amount of food that came in today and that it's coming in the next day and the next day. And so it lets the weight drop off. And by 46 weeks, the body was basically returned to where it started, in a healthy weight range and with health returned, and all without restricting and dieting and constant exercise. So I want to now share with you another study just to help shed light on this process a little better. And this time, instead of looking at what happens when a diet is restricted, let's look at what happens when someone sort of intentionally overeats. So the Vermont prison study was conducted in 1964. Apologies for the rather shoddy and grainy picture. I couldn't find anything worthwhile online, and I had to take this still from a very grainy video on YouTube. But the more important stuff is what I'm going to tell you. It's not the picture. So for the study, the 7 prisoners were enlisted as part of an overfeeding experiment. with the intention of measuring the sort of number and size of fat cells once a certain amount of weight had been gained. So the volunteers there was 5 subjects and 2 controls, and they were between 20 and 30 years old with normal body weight ranging from 61 kilos to 84 kilos. And so the study started with 6 weeks of just normal eating to maintain their weight. There was then a period of 3 to 4 months of overfeeding to reach the maximum attainable weight. And the goal was really to increase weight by 25%. And when this would happen, they would then have a period of 10 weeks to eat with maintaining that weight. And if the subjects couldn't reach 25% at the point where they believed they were at their sort of maximum weight, it was then this 10-week period to maintain that weight. So during the overfeeding period, the average weight gain was 16.2 kilos or 35.5 pounds, which was between 15 to 25% of an increase. And during the overfeeding period, the men were consuming anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 calories a day. And what's interesting is only 2 of the subjects were able to hit that 25% increase. One of the subjects couldn't get his weight above an 18% increase, despite consuming a whopping 10,000 calories a day. And what was also interesting was that during the overfeeding period, the weight went on sort of easier in the beginning, became more difficult over time, and then became even more difficult to keep it on. And all the participants were consuming sort of huge amounts of calories just to try and maintain the new weight. And so with each of them, basically their metabolic rate just kind of went through the roof. And once the experiment was over, all of the men fairly quickly returned to their pre-experiment weight without difficulty. So both of these experiments point towards something known as the weight set point theory. And the weight set point theory is the idea that the body naturally and automatically controls your weight. It suggests that your body has sort of an ideal weight range that likes to keep you between. And this can be anywhere from a really small amount up to about sort of 15 to 20 kilos or 23 to 45 pounds. And it's often estimated at roughly 10% of someone's body weight. So most people will fluctuate up and down within this range on a fairly regular basis. But moving outside of this range is just much more difficult. And these experiments really show that the body will fight to get the body back into its ideal range if it's provided with what it needs. And I see this play out with clients all the time. Their weight won't budge, kind of no matter how little they eat or how much exercise they seem to do. But through us working together, they find a number that's maybe 1-2 kilos heavier. And at this level, they can just stay there easily. They're eating much more. They're exercising less or just exercising to their real maximum instead of kind of constantly sort of running themselves into the ground. They aren't freaking out about food or panicking about going to a friend's dinner. They're completely happy and sort of it's with a lot less work. And honestly, when I do start working with a client, it is common for them to put on some weight. I'd like to say it's different, but it's the truth. And really, it's just part of the healing process. How much weight someone puts on will be dependent on how long they've been sort of getting on and off the sort of diet merry-go-round and what they've been doing to their body. And while the fear is that the weight will kind of constantly go up, this just isn't the case. Normally, pretty quickly, the weight levels out. And this is when someone's eating what sort of historically would have felt like a huge amount of food. And they're able to do it without sort of fear and restriction, all the while with their health improving. So let me just use a recent client example to kind of demonstrate this. So this client, she was female, in her early 30s. She's an actress, and she told me that how much she weighed was paramount to her job. She dieted in one form or another for the last 15 years. And for really anyone on the outside, they would have thought that it was working. She has the kind of body that most people would kill for and is naturally very attractive. The kind of face and body that wouldn't look out of place on the cover of some glossy magazine, and it probably has appeared there at some point. But on the inside, things weren't working so well. So no periods, low energy, constipation, bloating, headaches, poor sleep. But more than this, she had a real strong sort of dissatisfaction with how she looked and what she weighed. No matter how hard she tried, she could just never get her weight to where she desired. So no amount of exercise or restricting would allow her to feel comfortable in her body. And this was what she just so desperately wanted. So working together, things completely changed. Her periods returned shortly after we started working together. She started eating more. Her sleep and energy drastically improved. No more bloating, no more constipation, no more headaches. Much more confident and grounded in her body. And she really learned to work with it instead of against it. And this was something that she'd really never done before. And she found that this was all with a sort of a lot less effort than her old life. And about 4 months after we started together, she went on holidays and she had a really good time. She ate loads of food and spent very little time thinking about it. She got to hang out with friends. She got to have some good relaxation, and she had some sort of fun late nights. When she got back, she was looking at photos, and she said that she weighed more now than she used to. And she'd actually gone on holiday to the same place at the same time of year the year before, and was looking at photos of how she used to look. And she said that she used to look skinny then. So I asked her, like, when you were that weight, how did you feel? Did you feel more comfortable and more confident in your skin? And to paraphrase her response, it was, oh God, no. I was obsessed with what I ate and wanting to lose more weight. I didn't think I was thin. I was always so negative about my body. During that holiday, I was always worried about how I looked, totally different to this time round. Plus, I had all the other stuff going on. No periods, crappy digestion, my health was terrible. So about a month later, she went on another trip, and this time it was a work trip. She was going to meet with different agents and movie people to help expand her career. And these trips had previously just filled her with dread. She'd always be sort of starting some diet before going away, and she'd be telling herself she had to look a certain way or weigh a certain amount, or she'd just be rejected. And when she got back, she told me that it was her best trip yet. All the meetings had gone better than she could have hoped. She felt confident and felt relaxed, and probably in no small part because she was sort of eating and wasn't starving herself while she was out there. And she said it was going to be sort of hugely positive in terms of her career. And this was the best trip she'd had while weighing more than ever before. And in the whole scheme of things, she didn't weigh that much more. But it's always easy for me to say. For a lot of women, a small increase can feel like the end of the world. And what she ultimately realized, that while she was telling herself that her weight was the thing that was holding her back and that she needed to weigh less, it wasn't really the case. It was a story or a belief that she created. But at a heavier weight, she was able to experience the best results through meetings ever. And I think if an actress who works and lives in possibly the sort of shallowest and sort of most body conscious industry in the world can sort of make this realization, then I think there's a lot of hope for the rest of us. And this is kind of one of the important things that I really want you to get from this webinar today. People want to lose weight because of what they tell themselves they're going to get when it happens. That there is a certain sort of cause-effect relationship, that when the weight comes off, they're going to be totally confident, or they'll meet that perfect guy, or they'll get that dream job, that they'll have more respect, that they'll get more attention. And unfortunately, this kind of fairy tale just isn't true. And so to help demonstrate, let me share with you another client as an example. And this, again, is a female who is in her early 30s. She suffered with anorexia on and off for the last 15 years. She's been in and out of different treatment facilities, being admitted typically when her weight got so low and things just got so out of hand. And when working with clients, I'll often get them to do different exercises. We'll then sort of talk about what they wrote or what they watched or what they read and what they experienced, and sort of go through it. And the goal of these exercises is to help them come to their own realizations. Because I can tell them, and they've been told countless times before, that what they're doing is wrong or it's unhealthy. But if I can get them to reach that decision on their own, for them to kind of really own that belief, then it just makes such a difference. So one of the exercises that I do is I ask the person to write down what are their fears that lead to their specific eating behavior. And this could be sort of binge eating or purging. But in the case of this person, it was someone who was significantly under eating. I then get them to list what are their biggest fears because of their specific food and eating issue. So in a sense, what do they currently see are the consequences for following through on this behavior? And what was interesting when we did this exercise was how many of the exact same things appeared on both columns, and how her eating issues were actually leading to a lot of the issues that she was trying to avoid by following a specific eating pattern. So on the fears side of what was causing her to have her eating behavior, it was, I'll get fat, no one will love me, I won't get attention from men, I won't love myself, I won't respect myself, no one will be my friend, I'll be depressed, I'll lose total control, I'll eat too much. And on the side, in terms of consequences of her following through on her eating behaviors, it was, I won't live long, I'll have serious health problems, my marriage will collapse, I've isolated myself to the point of having no friends, my children will follow my pattern of behavior, I'll be stuck forever, this eating disorder will control me, I won't ever be able to eat normally. And this was really a huge realization for her. And she realized that kind of her worst fears had sort of come true or on the brink of coming true. And rather than her sort of eating behavior protecting her, it was really largely the cause of a lot of her problems. And why I realize this is an extreme example, lots of people are experiencing degrees of this every day. Your diet and health pursuits and beliefs about your weight should help to enhance your life. They should make you a better person, sort of physically, but also mentally and emotionally. They should make you stronger in every sense of the word. But for a lot of people, it kind of does the opposite. Their unrealistic goals and mistaken beliefs sort of chip away at their health and happiness. And it's why when I work with someone, we don't just look at sort of physiology and physical symptoms. We look at the mental and emotional stuff as well. And it's because they're all interconnected. So eating more food, say, improves someone's physical health, but it sort of removes cravings and also helps them to have more stable mood. So helping with sort of mental and emotional stuff. Working on the mental stuff helps people to understand the things that they say to themselves and how this can then affect their food choices and the emotions they feel. Working on emotions, we look at sort of what people are focusing on to create those feelings. And I show people how they can change this. And it allows them then to be able to focus on what the body is really saying and to sort of let go of a lot of the negative chatter. Because real health is about getting sort of all of these areas working. It's not about having sort of abs or a low body fat percentage. It's about having sort of solid physical, mental, and emotional strength. And when all of these things are in place, maintaining a healthy weight is sort of easy, and it can basically be done on autopilot. Sure, it takes some work, but often these things can be so ingrained as habits that you can sort of almost forget about them. And this is why being able to maintain a healthy weight without restriction and deprivation and constant exercise is so important, because it doesn't just improve your physical body, it improves your sanity. So I know we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to just pull this all together by sort of recapping on some of what we've talked about and sort of giving you a list of things that I suggest to sort of help maintain a sort of healthy weight. So to start with, you want to meet your body's demands and start eating to meet your body's demands. And this is sort of absolutely crucial. And it's the only way you kind of get to that sort of place of body freedom or being able to kind of relax around food. If you keep underpaying your body, it's going to keep underperforming. So start to work out what your body needs and sort of give it to it day in and day out. And if you're doing this, there's really no way that your health can't improve. And as I said, I will email you the link for the calorie calculator that I went through earlier in this presentation. So you can go there and you can access the tool and you can start to look at, okay, what the numbers really should be for you. Be prepared for some initial weight gain. I'd love to tell you that this wasn't the case, but the truth is for most people, it's unavoidable. Expectations are a big part of how someone reacts to a situation or whether they see it as good or bad. My hope is that by you knowing this in the beginning, that it'll soften the blow. And the point isn't to just gain weight for sort of weights it for itself. Just like we saw in the Minnesota starvation experiment, you should be seeing symptoms improving as the weight goes on. The two should be going hand in hand. Because as I regularly say to clients, you might say put on sort of 2 kilos or 3 kilos, but if you're already or also kind of sleeping better, not having afternoon crashes, your period's more regular, your hair's no longer falling out, then this should show you that despite the negatives you may associate with the extra weight, this stuff is actually working. But as I said, you do get to the point where this stops and you're then able to maintain a weight while eating everything that the body needs. Become more in tune with your body. I really think that the reason diet books sell so well is because it allows people to give up responsibility. You don't have to think. You can just follow what the diet plan says. And the chances of this actually working are absolutely tiny. Creating health is all about feedback. Nothing is set in stone. While there are foods that are typically better or typically worse, what happens in reality can vary greatly. So following something blindly just doesn't allow for these differences. So really start to focus on your symptoms and how they're affected by the changes that you make. These should be the things that help to guide you along that process. Do things that first focus on repair. This is where most people need to start. Most people aren't as healthy as they should be or they'd like to be. They normally try to remedy this through dieting and cleanses and restricting, and this has just really pushed them further away from health. The place you need to start is by supporting your body to increase your metabolism and really the functioning of all your different systems. And really give your body what it needs for a couple of months. And I really promise you that you're going to be pleasantly surprised with the results that you notice. Analyze your beliefs and assumptions about your weight. And this is a really big one. Often people tell themselves that they want to lose weight to improve their health. They then learn that they can be healthy without losing any weight, but their desire to lose weight doesn't go away. So what's going on then? Well, it's because people aren't really focusing on health. They want to lose their weight for different reasons. So look at the assumptions and the beliefs about what you think the weight loss will do for you. If you think it's going to lead to more happiness, why do you think this is so? Do you know anyone who is your weight who is already happy? Do you know anyone who is at the ideal weight that you want to get to who is unhappy? And for most people, they're going to be able to answer yes to both these questions, which would typically indicate that it's not really about the weight. It's about what you falsely believe will happen when you get to this weight. And this stuff is really important and in lots of cases more important than what someone's actually eating. The mental and emotional stuff needs to be sort of understood and worked on for anyone to be happy, regardless of what their weight is. And I'd also say forget about weight as much as possible. For lots of people, weight has become their obsession. And personally, I want people to stop weighing themselves and focusing on their weight so much, because no matter what the number on the scale says, it makes people crazy in one way or another. But the other reason I want people to do this is because when people stop worrying about their weight, something strange happens. They normally get better control over it without thinking about it. And when I say forget about it, I don't mean just start eating junk food every day and never doing exercise. I mean, start focusing on health and using your symptoms as a guide for your eating. And if you do this, you'll start to get better. And maybe the weight will go up a couple of kilos. But as I said, this will steady and you'll be able to eat more food and having a lot of your symptoms disappear or greatly decrease. And it's important to remember the definition I gave of a healthy weight at the start of the webinar, a weight that's not impacting on the function or health of your body. It's not about sort of visible abs or sort of being a size 6 or looking like Jennifer Lawrence or Angelina Jolie or Kristen Bale or Hugh Jackman for the guys. Like, none of these things necessarily constitute a healthy weight, and often they can be indicative of the complete opposite. And as I mentioned earlier about the weight set point, I truly believe that there is a sort of weight band that your body wants you to be in if you'll let it. And maybe you can even get to the lower side of this band without causing an issue. But you have to let health dictate this and make sure that you're doing things that are supporting your body alongside your weight loss goals. So that is my list of things that I would suggest to help. Hopefully you've been sort of writing feverishly and making lots of notes, because I really believe if you can be implementing this stuff and following these ideas, you're going to notice some real huge improvements. What I would say is I know that not everyone wants to do this stuff on their own. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to be opening my doors to my practice again and open them to new clients. And the last time I took on new clients was last summer, and I haven't taken on any new clients since then. I do 2 intakes of clients a year, and this is my first one for 2015. And I only work with 20 to 22 people at a time. It means that I can give these people my sort of 100% attention. At this stage, there's already 3 of those slots are gone because I have a waiting list of people who wanted to get early notification. And there's another sort of 3 or 4 people who are interested and I'm speaking to next week. And lots of nutritionists recommend sort of boatloads of supplements and tests. It's not uncommon for someone to walk out of their first session with a nutritionist with a list of sort of 4 or 5 or even more supplements, sort of forking over 100 or 150 pounds in supplements. And this needs to be sort of kept up month after month. Or sort of having really expensive lab tests recommended to them as sort of quote unquote standard. Tests that range anywhere from sort of 70 pounds to 200 or 300 pounds per test. And about 80% of my clients finish seeing me and I haven't recommended a single supplement. For those that I have, it's maybe one thing or possibly 2. And this is usually just like one pot, like one time. On the test front, like 80 to 90% of my clients finish up without doing any expensive tests. And if we get to the point where we do need to do some testing, it's because we've realized that it's genuinely really important and we want to see that extra information. It's not because it's routine or it's just the norm. And I work with clients for a period of 5 months, and consults are for an hour every 2 weeks. And through the years of sort of trial and error, I found that this is just the best way to get results. I want to work with people who are committed and want to see long-term improvements, and this is the best way of doing it. And so my costs, there are 3 options depending on how someone wants to pay. The first is £949 for one payment. The second is £499 if they want to do it over 2 payments. And the third is £210 if they want to do it over 5 payments. But as I said, there's very little expense apart from this, and most of the time there is no other expense. And despite the lack of supplements, the lack of tests, I get great results, glowing testimonials from people who've overcome lifetime food issues, who've reversed their symptoms, who've been able to conceive after years of failing. And because of this and my being confident that I'm able to deliver, I offer 100% money back guarantee. And the guarantee is this: if at the end of working together you aren't 100% happy with the results, let me know and I'll refund your money. Just demonstrate that you followed my advice and it hasn't improved your health and what you came to see me for, and I'll refund everything that you paid. So how am I able to make this guarantee? It's because I'm really selective with who I work with. I will only agree to work with someone if I truly believe that I can help them. So many people will work with sort of anyone who shows the slightest bit of interest, that they'll promise them the kind of moon on a stick just to get them as a client. And I'm not like that. If I don't believe I can generally help you and that you aren't the right fit for me, I'll tell you when we won't work together. I don't want to waste people's time or money because I truly believe that people should be paid based on the results that they can provide. And I also want to make sure that the clients can keep up their end of the bargain. I'd love to say that signing up with me will instantly make all your problems disappear, but we both know that that's not true. The results that people get are based on the effort that they put in. And ironically, for a lot of people, they put in less effort when we work together. They're just then doing the right things. But if someone isn't prepared to put in the work, then it's just not going to happen. I only get to work with 20 odd people at once. And for me, really nothing beats the feeling of seeing someone sort of transform their life. People who've been dealing with stuff for years or even decades. And so I want to make each of those spots count. And I just pick people who are A, sort of most willing, and B, sort of the best fit for what I'm able to help people with. So when I chat with someone and say, yes, I can help you, it's because I truly believe it. And I then back it up with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you think that you might fit the bill, then the next step is for us to have a free chat. This can be either phone or Skype and lasts for about 40 to 50 minutes. This way I get to find out more about you, about what you want help with, and I can also explain more about how I work. If at the end we decide we're a good match, then we can work together. If either of us feels that it's not the right thing, then we go our separate ways, and it really is that simple. So if this all sounds good, then go ahead and register for a free chat. To do this, you need to go to the address that's on the screen now that you're seeing, which is www.7-health, so that's seven-health.com/chat. So that's my normal address with /chat. And here you'll see a simple form for where you enter your name and your email address, and this will be sent to me, and I will then send you an email within 24 to 48 hours so we can arrange a time to speak. And like I said, I know this isn't going to be for everyone. Most people have just excuse me, most people have just jumped on here because they wanted to catch some free information. And I think that's great. And I hope I provided that for you and that you've got some real value from it. But if you are someone who wants some personal help and you're wanting to take some action, then go to this page and enter your name and your email, and we can look at working together. So that's it for today's webinar. I thoroughly enjoy putting this together for you, and I just really love talking about this stuff. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I just know how valuable time is, and it's one thing you can never get back. So I really want to thank you for that. If there's any sort of final take-home message I want to give you from today, it's this. Health, it should be your number one priority. Yes, you can want to look a certain way, but this should be understood sort of mentally and emotionally, not just physically. Making aesthetic changes to your body doesn't guarantee sort of health and happiness. And for a lot of people, it provides the opposite. So if you want to make changes, first and foremost, make sure you're maintaining your weight while eating everything that your body needs, because this is really the most important thing for long term. And I know that if you can be doing this, that you'll have sort of a life of sort of health and happiness. So that's it. I wish you all the best, and I hope at some point during the year to be able to kind of catch up with you either in person or on another webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day or night wherever you are in the world, and take care. Cheers.